Osiris.
Howdy, folks. Thanks for tuning in to GuitarCast with Andy Keithley, a member of the Osiris Podcast Network. This episode features guitarist Adam Levy, who tells me all about his career playing with legendary artists like Norah Jones, Alan Toussaint, Ani DeFranco, and more recently with Michel Ndegeocello and Wolfbeck. Find us on the web at guitarcast.net and on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at GuitarCastPod. I'm also excited to announce that GuitarCast will be at this year's Con of Thrones. It's Memorial Day weekend in Dallas, and it is the largest ever convention for fans of Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire. There's going to be about a dozen or so of the actors from the show doing meet and greets and panels, and a bunch of other panel discussions on a whole host of topics related to Game of Thrones. There's also a lot of really impressive Game of Thrones cosplay happening, so you can see people dressed up as White Walkers and Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow. I will be on the Sounds of Westeros panel, talking about the music and lyrics of George R.R. Martin and Ramin Djawadi. That's Friday, May 25th at 1 p.m. in the Westeros Room. And right before that panel, in the same room at noon, is a panel called Fire from the Ice, How the Grateful Dead's Music Influenced A Song of Ice and Fire. So I'm pretty excited to check that one out too. And I plan on putting together a GuitarCast episode with some coverage from the panels at the con, and hopefully get some interviews and stuff like that with some of the other people who are involved. You can get tickets and schedule info and all the other info you need for Con of Thrones at conofthrones.net. We have another iTunes review. This one is a 5-star review from Butter Flutter Mullet, great screen name, who says, "Great Cassidy interview, great show." He's talking about episode 18 with banjo picker Mark Cassidy from Keller Williams Pettygrass. So thanks, Butter Flutter Mullet. Keep those iTunes reviews coming. Another way you can get in touch is the GuitarCast hotline. You can call in. The number is 323-834-8537. So call in and leave a voicemail with your questions and comments to the GuitarCast hotline. Here comes GuitarCast episode 20 with guitarist Adam Levy. So, here we are with Mr. Adam Levy. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you, Andy?
Pretty good. You know, it's a beautiful day here in LA.
It is. Wow.
The harsh winter is over.
The harsh winter is over, but my wife was just telling me she follows the weather way more closely than I do. She said more rain's coming.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
For sure.
That's not a bad thing. In the spirit of trying something new, I'll ask you this. What was your last gig played?
My last gig played was earlier this week. I have a steady Wednesday morning gig that I do in Pasadena. It's a guitar duo gig with a guy named Mason Stoops.
I know Mason.
Yeah. So most times it's acoustic. Occasionally there'll be an early, like the gig is 8:30 to 10 in the morning.
That's about as early as a gig could be.
Yeah, most people, when I tell them that, they don't believe me. They're like, they just look at me like,
yeah.
So
it's not a bar.
No, it's not a bar. It's just a coffee shop in Pasadena that has a kind of a cool space, and we started playing there about a year ago. And occasionally there'll be like an early morning text at 7:45, like one word electric, and then I'll show up with what I have here in my hands. Usually I'll bring my 330 and my Princeton reverb, but generally it's just us playing acoustic guitar, and yeah.
Sounds like a fun morning gig.
It's great.
So you mentioned this guitar. Tell me a little bit about that.
I had this for a couple of years. For many, many years, I've played 335s. I got one for my bar mitzvah, and so I kind of learned to play, with this kind of shape and this kind of neck, and then later I got another 335 that was more like kind of the 335s that people get excited about. The one I got for my bar mitzvah was a late 70s one. I mean, I was 13 in 1979, so that was a new guitar.
Man.
And so that was all I had for years. And then when I was touring with Norah Jones in the early 2000s and making some money, I was like, I want to get like a classic 335. So I got one from the early 60s with incredible pickups and a great neck. And so that's mostly what I play. And then a couple of years ago, I was looking for something with P90s. And funny enough, my wife saw on Facebook that a mutual friend of ours was selling a couple guitars, and she showed me a picture. She said, "This looks like a really beautiful guitar. Maybe we should go check it out." I thought, oh, okay. So
why not?
We did. And it's unusual. People can't see it, but it's a 1959 ES 330, and it has just one pickup. It's one P90.
Oh yeah, look at that
in the middle. And I don't know. I'm not like up on all the Gibson lore. I don't know why they did that, but I know. Do you know Mark Goldenberg?
Only the name, because I was referred to contact him for Guitarcast.
Okay, so he's got the same guitar. So I know that this isn't like a one-off. This is a thing Gibson did for a while in '59. They made single,
and it's red in the middle
guitars.
too.
Yeah, so it's kind of unlike, say, like if you had a Les Paul Junior, like a double cut. If you had a Les Paul, a '59 Les Paul with one pickup, it would be in the bridge. And if you had an arch top, it would be in the neck, like the Jim Hall ES 175 that he played. So this is kind of a funny guitar. But I love it. It's super simple. There's no switches. It's just volume and tone and one pickup. And
that is nice.
Yeah, very clean look.
That's pretty cool, man. And I've always I think every guitar player at some point has to kind of spend some time with these knobs, the switch, which might have 5 or more selector. It's like, for a lot of players, that could be too much to even know what's going on. So it's kind of nice to just see you got volume and tone.
Yeah.
And one pickup right there in the middle.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Norah Jones, and you were playing with her like right when she was kind of exploding onto the scene.
Yeah.
But so tell me about how'd you get hooked up with Norah Jones, and what was that like playing shows with her?
Well, I happened to meet her before she blew up. So when I met her, she was just a young singer in New York, and I met her at a bar seeing some mutual friends play, and had no idea of what was to come. I think when people ask me about that experience, they assume that I met her when she was already kind of on the rise, but quite the opposite. When I met her, she was still, I think, enrolled at North Texas.
Okay. And
was just kind of visiting New York for the summer to see if she might want to, spend more time there. And then a year went by when we were just playing like brunch gigs, just very, kind of jazz New York.
People are not paying attention
at all. Yeah. And I did that with her for a year, and then I moved back to California. Then I moved back to New York. And in that year that I was away was when she had, met the people at Blue Note and started being more serious about songwriting. When I met her, most of the gigs we did were like standards.
Mm-hmm. That's cool, man. And so where did that first year, where did that take you around the world, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it was. We went very quickly from being like the opening act for almost anybody, because Blue Note just didn't know quite what to do. So we opened for the Indigo Girls. We opened for Dave Matthews Band.
Wow.
We opened for John Mayer, who was really coming up at the same time, but was just, I think, playing a little bit bigger shows than we could play at that time. We opened for Taj Mahal. That was great. And then next thing I knew, we opened for Willie. That was probably a big deal thing early on. We did 4 nights at the Fillmore in San Francisco, opening for Willie Nelson. And that was super amazing. And then shortly after that, like within that year, it was all of a sudden we were headlining and we had a bus and all over the world, like Japan, China, Thailand, every country in Europe that I had ever heard of, all over South America. It was really, I burned through passports super quickly.
Man, I've never done that.
Yeah, just like, okay, well, there's no more pages, so I made a new passport.
Man, that's an awesome problem to have. Was that a trio, or was that 4 players, or?
It started as a trio. So the core of the Norah Jones band thing was we had a steady gig in New York City at this place, kind of near Lincoln Center. It was called McCore. And we played there pretty much every week for free, but just before she blew up for real, like we were playing there to like a dozen people every week. She was kind of this unknown secret gem in New York City. And then that was a 5-piece band. So I played just electric guitar. There was an acoustic guitar player named Jesse Harris, who was also responsible for some of the songs on her first record. Different drummers, but mostly Dan Reeser. Lee Alexander was playing bass, and Nora was playing. I think they had a baby grand piano there. But when we started touring, she couldn't take a 5-piece band out, so it got stripped down to just 3. And so I was playing electric and acoustic back and forth. I didn't have one of those guitar stands that you could just walk.
Well, yeah.
I didn't have one of those, but I would, depending on the song, I'd play one or the other. Nora would play Wurlitzer because we could put it in the van,
right? And
Lee would play upright bass, and that was the whole thing for a long time. And as it got bigger, she added a drummer, a guy named Andy Borger, who had toured with Tom Waits and is on the road now with Katie Lang, and. Then we added a second guitar player, a guy named Kevin Bright from Toronto, who's amazing. Then he left the band. Then Robbie McIntosh joined the band, who had been on the road with McCartney and the Pretenders and Mark Knopfler. So it went from this like little, kind of, what can fit in a van to like what
do we need?
What do we need?
Yeah.
So that was really thrilling.
So what did that do for you as a guitar player?
Yeah, well, it was for sure. It was eye-opening. I guess you could say I'm kind of a late bloomer, because when all that stuff was happening for Norah in the early 2000s, I was already in my mid-30s and had been playing, making my living playing guitar for 15 years. I joined Local 47 in 1986, I think, to do a recording session here in LA. So I'd been playing professionally for a long time, but really not that much touring. It had all been recording and club gigs and stuff.
Yeah. So
it was an interesting thing was that it was all new for her, but of course she was like 21 or 22 years old. I was, a decade and a half ahead of her in my life and in my career, but still new at all that road stuff. So what it did for me as a player was it got me to be more consistent in sound. Like Norah wasn't that into, she didn't want the same stuff every night. Like she didn't want the same guitar solos every night or anything like that. But just from like talking with the sound engineer and like the technical stuff, it's like, no, stuff has to be pretty much dialed in.
Yeah.
It's not helpful if you're reaching back and
Right.
adjusting
That
your
changes
amp
everything.
on the fly, which is what I was used to doing on sessions and in clubs.
Sure.
So I had to get a little bit more bulletproof in my gear. I had to put a pedal board together, which I'd never ever had.
What was on the pedal board?
Let's see. I had a Carl Martin delay that I can't even remember the name of, but it sounded great.
Yeah.
That's a pedal company people might know. I didn't know that much about overdrives or anything, and it wasn't a big part of that gig to have a heavy overdrive sound, but I still wanted to have something that could make it sound like the amp was breaking up a little bit, because I was touring with Princeton Reverbs mostly. So early on I had a Boss DS1, which gives you an idea of like, this was a while ago before the like boutique pedal explosion.
Right.
This really was before. I mean, I think I was aware of Analog Man and Robert Keeley, but like Earthquaker Devices wasn't a thing, and like all of the kind of boutique stuff just didn't exist.
Yeah, the Boss the whole series was like affordable. It was the kind of stuff that moms would buy for their teenage guitar playing son.
Yeah, right. Like if they got
daughter.
if they got them a guitar one Christmas, then I'm like, okay, it's the next Christmas or a birthday
Exactly.
or whatever. It's like, you need accessories. The Carl Martin thing by comparison was kind of like a high, like a boutique thing, just because it wasn't a $69 Boss pedal. But along the way, I remember going into a guitar shop and being like, the DS1 is not really the sound that I want. I still was thinking about Boss because they were cheap and they just dominated the market at that time. This is early 2000s.
Yeah.
So I went in, you used to see like at Guitar Center, they'd have a pedal board with
The
like
display rig.
the entire Boss line.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I walked in with my guitar plugged into the closest thing they had to a Princeton Reverb, and I just tried every single thing that made the guitar sound slightly dirtier. And the one that I settled on was the Boss OD3, which is still my favorite overdrive for that kind of thing, for like just sounding like you reached over and turned your amp up slightly.
So you just have it set on like a touch.
It's on minimal gain. It's literally at as low as it'll go.
This Tube Screamer Mini. It's all the way down.
Yeah.
And it's just for that little bit of crunch, and only when you're really like laying into a note.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. So that's what I have. I have a Boss OD3, tone at 12 o'clock, volume at 12 o'clock, gain at 0. But when you step on it, it just does the tiniest little thing. And that's really that. So that was then my pedal board. And, over the years I played with her, I would add things in. I tried different tremolos because it was not that convenient to use amp tremolo, again, just for super consistency. And I can't even remember what what I was using at that time was the Dunlop, the kind of big purple Dunlop with chrome knobs that kind of looks a little too
like a multi-effects?
No, it just did tremolo.
Oh, okay.
I think it said tremolo on it. And
kind of like a curved design, like a
curvy logo, but the box itself it just was like a little bigger than your average pedal. Yeah. And you could adjust the waveform and all, it did all the stuff that you want a tremolo to do, and I would use that. And that was kind of it. I think if I was on that gig now, I might have one or two other pedals, but I'm not a super pedal guy. And at that time, the sounds of her records to try and recreate the stuff that we did in the studio didn't require a lot of,
Well, you're getting most of your tone comes from your guitar and your amp.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't think you would need too much more than that. And so your background, before all this was mostly jazz. I mean, if your first guitar was a Gibson 335, I mean, that's incredible to me because I had to evolve to get to that point,
Yeah.
And I started off with just like a very cheap, solid body electric guitar and was playing, Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix songs. And the concept, when I first heard like Wes Montgomery and some of these, Joe Pass and Pat Martino, the difference in tone and just that big, round, warm, like bubbly tone to me was just like, whoa, where has this been all my life? I've been listening to distorted, overdriven rock guitar, which I still love, and that's kind of my, I love that stuff. But I didn't get into jazz. When I was in high school, I was in a jazz band, but I was still playing this, rock guitar, and I was taking lessons and kind of learning like triads and stuff, up the neck triads. And I think it was when I was in music school in college when I got more into jazz as a concept, not even like as a sound or anything, because jazz changes depending on who's in the room and what instruments you have.
Yeah.
But on the guitar, it's you take on more of a rhythm player role, and I was used to playing kind of lead and noodling and being like Mr. Guitar Screamer, So it was cool to like actually just kind of learn, hey, you just sort of need to accent what the bass and drums are doing. And
You're right. That's right.
Support for this podcast comes from Zuri Food, all natural, human-grade dog food, offering 4 different diets to optimize nutrition for your pup, and now 2 different kinds of dog treats as well. Visit zurifood.com today to order yours, because pups are people too. So, tell me about, since then, that was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
You've played with Ani DeFranco and who else? Amos Lee.
Amos Lee. I'm on Amos Lee's first record. I'm on a new record that's about to come out that Michelle Indeghiocello made. It's a record of, like covers records. It's a cover record of like, I think like late 80s R&B, but it's like totally reimagined. Like she really
that sounds amazing.
Took things to different places, and that is, I don't know the exact release date, but I just saw that NPR had one of those like first listen things, so it's out in the world. I got to play on Alan Toussaint's last record.
What was that like?
Incredible. I mean, I played on one song, but it's like it's an hour of my life that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yeah.
It was so incredible.
That's cool.
It was beautiful to meet him and to be in the studio with headphones on, and like in real time I'm playing the guitar and hearing his voice come through the headphones. It was something I won't ever forget. Let's see. I mentioned earlier I play with Mason Stoops. We're working on a record together. We have a guitar duo that's called Kibi Dango, which is just the name of a Japanese treat that we both enjoy.
Cool.
That you would have with tea. And let's see. I have a group with Rich Hinman, who's a great pedal steel player here in LA, and we have a band that made a record that's in mastering right now. Should be out by the end of this year, I hope.
Cool.
As far as playing with other people, let's see.
I noticed like Wolfpack was on your website.
Yeah.
What was that?
That was one of the most fun days ever. So I live in Glass Hill Park, which is like kind of near Eagle Rock and Highland Park. And I used to run into Jack Stratton at this coffee shop there on York Boulevard. And I knew who he was from just being a fan of Wolfpack from their previous records and videos and stuff. And I chatted him up. I was like, are you Jack? I was just kind of like starstruck in a way. It's like, wow, are you that guy? And so we talked for a little bit, and he was telling me about this. He had gotten to work with David T. Walker on their last record. He loves guitar players. I mean, there are guitar players in the band already.
Right.
Theo plays guitar.
Exactly.
Jack plays guitar.
They switch
Corey
it up.
Wong plays guitar with them. So, but they like to do stuff with guests. And then Rich and I, like I mentioned, we have this band, and Jack and Theo Katzman would come to shows that we would play, and they seemed to just dig the band. And then one day I got I don't know, I'll say a call. It might have been a text or an email, but
right.
I got a call from Theo saying, hey, do you and Rich want to come, jam with us on a song? Jack wrote something with you guys in mind, and it's kind of like a J.J. Cale kind of vibe. And Rich and I were like, okay, sure. Like, is there a demo or a chart and they're like, no, just come down. And we really didn't know anything about what it was going to be like other than it was those guys and it was going to be a JJ Cale vibe. And I knew that they recorded live. Like when you see videos of them, like, I don't know if you've seen the one with Blake Mills or anything they've done. It's all really just like live in the living room or someplace.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those.
So they mix those, but basically what you're hearing is what you see. And so Rich and I showed up at this funky little studio in Echo Park. I mean, just a tiny little matchbox of a studio, and they had already set everything up. And Theo was playing drums and had to play really quietly because we're all in the room recording, like, you know, within arm's reach of each other.
Sure.
So he's gotten really good at playing like deep pocket drums at a very low volume.
That's a skill.
It is a skill. Jack was playing like a Squier Strat. Their piano player Woody was playing this, you know, rinky-dink spin-it piano there. And Rich and I did our thing, and they basically showed us the song, and in showing it to us, that was like almost take one, and then take two was like, we're doing it. And like they basically recorded it. There's a couple guys with GoPros in the room just trying to capture it. And after 2 or maybe 3 takes, not more than 3, I like to think it was just 2, they were like, cool. And I was like, okay. And
we got it.
And then, you know, a few months later, there it was. It kind of blew my mind because I'm a fan of their music, and also I think their videos are really fun. And yeah, that's what happened.
Let's do a little bit of playing.
Sure.
And we don't really have anything, you know, lined up, but I don't know. Maybe do you have like a personal warm up that you kind of do, that all guitar players have something where they just need to test that their amp is on and that their guitar's in tune?
Yeah.
What's your go-to? Like, what does your hand want to... For me, it's like E, you know?
I think I will hit an E just to hear that the guitar's in tune, and then I like the sound of like seconds and fifths, and so a lot of times just when I'm warming up, I'll just, you know, grab at shapes and stuff on the guitar, and it helps me to see if the guitar's in tune, and it also just sounds good to me. Like I could do that for a long time and not get bored with it.
Dissonance.
Yeah, it's not the typical kind of chord voicing stuff, you know. It just has to do with, I don't know. I think it partly has to do with this lesson. I took years ago the lesson with this guy, Mike Miller, who's a great guitar player. And he was into those kinds of sounds. And I had just kind of learned all the kind of normal jazz guitar chords, and this lesson I had with him kind of opened my mind to like, oh yeah, intervals are a thing. You don't always have to play chords with names. You can just think about intervals. So that's when I first pick up a guitar, I think I'm thinking about intervals.
So would you say like the normal jazz chords, you mean find a root and build the chord off of that root?
Right. Like that. Right. So this is a chord with a root on the bottom.
C major 7,
root 5, 7, 3. It's a beautiful sound. There's nothing wrong with that sound. But at the time I met Mike Miller, and this is a long time ago, I was really curious about other ways to put notes together. And he had this whole way of thinking about it that just really had to do with the intervals. So it's funny, I still grab at that stuff now all these years later. I mean, I had literally one lesson with Mike Miller, but really changed the way I thought about the guitar.
You know, I've had that too, where I've had both. I've had teacher mentors that I took for years, you know. Really just one, Aaron Evans. He's out there in Virginia. And then I've also had like one-off lessons where in 1 hour your mind is just like blown because of one thing somebody says or whatever, For me, that was bluegrass. I had one sit down with a really good flat picker who kind of just opened the door for me.
Wow.
That's Matt Arcara.
In Virginia?
That was up in Boston. So I was kind of, I auditioned for the bluegrass ensemble at Berkeley and really didn't have much of a background in like traditional flat picking.
Sure.
I just thought it was, hey, I'm blues scale and I'm up here.
Yeah.
It's all down here,
right.
First position,
Yes,
and it's
right.
a totally different rhythm pattern than you.
Yeah.
So I got turned down on my first, I got denied, and my teacher said, hey, why don't you go take a lesson with this guy, Matt Arcara. He won the Winfield flat picking competition, and he's a hell of a flat picker. So I did that, and he kind of told me what I was doing wrong, which I've learned that a lot of times it's better to learn what you're doing wrong rather than what are the right things to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to know what is specifically not the right thing to do if you're learning a style or something like that. Tell me about guitar tips, and then let's play something. Let's just, I don't know if you got something that you would play with a student or, but let's tell the listeners about guitar tips.
Okay. I started Guitar Tips a few years ago on as a YouTube thing for free. I'd never had a YouTube channel before. I just, before that I would occasionally post, here's a clip from a gig. And I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to do something that was like a weekly thing. It wasn't a guitar lesson per se that was like, it wasn't meant to be lesson. It was just like kind of think pieces more than anything else. And occasionally it was more like a lesson. Occasionally I'd just be out for a walk and holding my phone and talk about some stuff without even a guitar in my hand.
Right.
Eventually, I kind of got it to a more regular way of doing it. And then I took a break after 120 in a row.
Wow.
So 120 weekly episodes, that's 2 years and then
that's
a little
basically
bit more.
A podcast,
Yeah. I mean, so I did that, and then I took a break. I just needed a break to refresh my head. And then I restarted it at the end of last year, at the end of 2017, as a thing through Patreon. So now it's called Guitar Tips Pro, and
cool.
People can subscribe at different levels. And it's been really fun. It's made me... the challenge with Guitar Tips Pro is that after 120 episodes, I've covered a lot of stuff. I've covered, everything from like, just what to think about and how to practice to like a whole long series about melodic minor modes or a whole long series about diminished scales. Like I've covered a lot of meat and potatoes stuff in the original series. And in Guitar Tips Pro, especially since people are now paying for it, I've tried to think of like, how can I make it, just more valuable and have things that have some permanence to it.
Yeah. Me doing this podcast, I think this might be, I think this is going to be the 20th episode, So I can already tell that there's this sort of like push and pull with what have I already covered and talked about, but also there are people who are just listening for the first time.
Right.
So how do you kind of juggle all that and just make it interesting, and it's fun figuring it out on the fly, just kind of doing it. But so where can we find Guitar Tips? AdamLevy.com.
If you go to AdamLevy.com, there is a link from there, or if you want to go directly, it's GuitarTipsPro.com.
Okay, cool. So what do you, do you think you can do the theme song for me here?
Sure. Let's see. Guitar tips, just the tips, just for you. Guitar tips.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's different every time. Sometimes I'll do a recognizable classic guitar thing, and sometimes I'll just play. But what I was playing it there, it's funny, I never put those two things together. There's a song that I play every week with Mason that I also play with Rich in our band. I could show it to you. It's just a few chords, and maybe we could play it together.
Absolutely.
So it's called "Something You Got." It was written by a songwriter named Chris Kenner, and it was recorded by Wilson Pickett and a bunch of people. It's very much the changes to "Just a Closer Walk with Thee." I don't know if you happen to know.
I know that one.
Okay,
I played that one with Molly when she was on the podcast.
That's funny. So Molly and I teach at this school in Pasadena called Los Angeles College of Music, where I was the chair and I stepped down, and she's now the chair. Last year, Mike Stern came and did a clinic, or now maybe 2 years ago.
Cool.
2 years ago, and we were playing, and I'm on stage with him. He's like, "Yeah, let's play." And so, we're playing kind of bebop tunes, which I'm so out of my depth in these days. I don't really woodshed bebop like, but I was like, "Man, could we play Just a Closer Walk with Thee?" And we did, and it was. I hope that was recorded, because it was great to play like a 3-chord song with Mike Stern and just hear how he explores that space.
Yeah, that's cool.
So this is basically those same changes in B flat. So we'll just go through the changes once, and then I'll play the melodies.
Awesome.
To the 5. It stays on the 5. Back to 1.
Awesome. Great plan, man.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool having you here.
Yeah, you ask good questions.
Thanks again for being here, and you're welcome to come back on a GuitarCast anytime. Thanks
so much.
All right. This episode was produced, hosted, and edited by me, Andy Keithley. On the next episode of GuitarCast, I'm joined by bluegrass mandolinist Scott Gates from the Get Down Boys and the Salty Sweets. For more GuitarCast, go to guitarcast.net and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Osiris.